Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this December 16th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every evening, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Time, or they also play the show at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, and if you can't get it there, go to my long-standing website at arcticbeacon.com. That's arcticbeacon.com. And you can get shows and articles going back over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. All right, it's Friday, and there's so much going on in the world, you don't know where to start sometimes. There's a lot of chaos. Put it that way, just what the Jesuits like. Order out of chaos. And let's get right to my Jesuit quote of the day. And we got to go to John Adams, and many of you probably that listen to my show have heard it before. He's made a number of quotes about the Jesuits. And John Adams, of course, was our second president of the United States. And I bet you there's more than half the people in the United States wouldn't even know that. That's our problem, education, folks. We have been, by the Jesuits, dumbed down to a point of almost absurdity. People have no idea where many people who listen to this show for the first time that don't understand anything about the Vatican just kind of like roll their eyes and go, God, this is crazy. But anyway, it's not. And just shows you that if you dig deep, you can get to the truth. So it's never too late. What did John Adams actually say about the Jesuits? He said, "My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities and facts, and it is very particular and very horrible. They, the Jesuit order's restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII, is indeed a step toward darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is the Society of Loyola, the Jesuits." Now, how come all these great historians never want to tackle that side of the story? Now, if you were not controlled, if you were not working for these people, trying to hide their real motives, you would want to dig into that quote and start researching what was their involvement in the Revolutionary War, what was their involvement in our history, and what was their involvement in the Civil War. Did they actually try to kill Lincoln and try to kill many other presidents? What are they doing today? How about all their land holdings? How about all of these pedophilia crimes that seem to go all the way back to them? Don't you think these questions should be asked when we talk about the totality of the United States of America? But it's almost if it's like doesn't exist. These people do not exist. And remember that quote I read by that one Jesuit general from, I believe, somewhere in the 1600s? He said, the Jesuit general is the head of the military order. He said, "We control China and every part of the world from our seat here in Rome, and no one knows how we do it." And that's exactly what they do here. No one knows how they do this here. 99% of the people do not understand it. Now, I met one person that did, and that was I met one person that did, Father Alberto Rivera, I should say, and I met his wife and read all about Alberto. But there's one person that met Father Alberto Rivera, a Jesuit priest, actually had him speak at his ministry in the 80s, and that was Pastor Tony Alamo. And what I'm going to do today, I want to go over this petition because Tony has, like I've mentioned on this show many times, has been persecuted by the Vatican for over 40 years. And if you don't know about it, let me just read you. I've started a petition online to get him out of prison. He's been in prison since 2008 on trumped-up charges. and a 175-year sentence. What a travesty of justice. And Tony Alamo and his ministry have been targeted for more than 40 years by U.S. government agencies, including but not limited to the FBI, BATF, CIA, and IRS. FBI informants have come forward with sworn testimony that they were hired to frame Pastor Alamo for his biblical and political views. This sworn testimony was not allowed in his 2008 criminal trial for violations of the Mann Act, and in which close examination of trial and appeal documents indicate a miscarriage of justice of the worst degree. Furthermore, this ministry has been falsely depicted as a cult by government officials and an orchestrated media campaign of the ruling elite and Vatican-controlled powers in our government. Our goal is to have 82-year-old Pastor Tony Alamo released from prison immediately. He has already served more than 8 years of a 175-year sentence for crimes he did not commit. He is presently in poor health, legally blind, and needs proper medical care, which he is not receiving in prison. While the Obama administration has allowed illegal immigrants to run free on the streets, and you just watch who he starts pardoning in his last days as a president. Remember that what Bill Clinton did with Mark Rich? Pardoned him at the last minute before midnight or something. And then, Mark Rich was on the 10 most wanted, FBI most wanted list. Now, while Obama has allowed these illegal immigrants to run free on our streets, our same government has made an innocent Christian pastor a political prisoner, simply because his views differ from those in power, both in government and on the pulpits. It's a very rainy and cold day here, and when you're not used to that, it kind of affects your voice a little. But listen, I'm a journalist and a radio host. I've worked in Rome during the 1980s. I understand the beast. I understand who they are. I didn't go there with that intention. And in fact, I went there and not knowing anything really about the Vatican, and learned exactly what they're all about. Okay, so, a lot of how I got onto this story was through personal experience and how I lived in Rome and learned about them when I was there during the biggest Vatican bank scandal in the history of the Vatican. It was incredible, and learned much about how they operate. And when I came back, I was looking for people that understood this in America and ran into Tony. Interviewed him a number of times before they imprisoned him. Now, like I said, I'm a journalist and a radio host. Now, by the way, this story can't get out on mainstream media. And this story can't even get out on the alternative media, really. And that's why, because most of the big alternative guys like Alex Jones and the rest, some of those top guys are all controlled by them, work for them. And this isn't uncommon. The Jesuits will actually have people in control, talking against them, that are actually working with them, because you have to control the opposition. That's why you don't hear this story in many places, and really can't get it on the mainstream. And this is really what should be told. Now, one good example of this, let me give you an example. Everybody's been talking about this Pizzagate story. That's this pedophile ring that was uncovered through the WikiLeaks emails by Julian Assange, where it was, when you start reading these emails of John Podesta, the Clinton campaign manager, and the connections between this Comet ping pong place, the pictures on Instagram of these kids in bondage, sort of, and I want to get to this in a minute, why this story came out. First, Julian Assange, I believe, is a CIA asset. Otherwise, this stuff would never be getting out. So finally, they release all this stuff about pedophilia, and then they send over a crisis actor to basically shoot one of these pedophiles. And of course, he didn't shoot anybody. I guess he shot the tile floor. And then it turns out this guy's working for them as well. You can find he was a crisis actor. He was an actor on IMDb page, you can find. And so you see how this whole thing was set up. Now, immediately after that, the Pope, Hillary Clinton, and then the mainstream media on both the left and the right, both Fox News and CNN, came out stating that all this is fake news and these people should be shut down from the internet. This is hate speech. And look at John Podesta. They're not involved in this. This pizzeria is a nice place. And, even yesterday, there's a woman named Megyn Kelly. She works on Fox. She makes $20 million a year to spread lies. And look, she gives the truth on some stories, but she doesn't get behind the truth. Well, she brought on the owner of Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria, and they tried to say this, I have just a businessman being ruined, and these people on the internet need to be stopped, and their accounts need to be taken away. And then he said one of the pictures that they're saying that we're running a pedophile ring here, and he shows this picture of this girl, and her arms are all taped to a table. And he says, they want you to believe that we did something to this girl, when in fact there was a party for kids and her sister was taping her arms. Now look, that to me, who does that or allows that? Kids don't want their arms taped to the table. I was a kid. If I was that age and somebody was taping my arms to the table, I wouldn't let it happen. I'd be running around going crazy. You're not taping my arms. So they want you to believe this nonsense. And then they want to shut down the government. Now, this story filters from Julian Assange, who's an asset. They're allowed to get out. It goes into the hands of Alex Jones, who works for them. He pushes it. Then the media fires back, pushing against Alex Jones and the rest of their group. And you can see the Hegelian dialectic working perfectly. What they want to do is quash any kind of talk about scandals that go to the Vatican or anywhere else regarding any of these pedophile rings that are going on all over the country. So I presented shows I did from 2008 and 2009 just the other day regarding a New York police detective who I had interviewed many times, who was working Vice and who was basically working on a task force to uncover these pedophiles. It went all the way to Cardinal Spellman at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, as well as high-level people in both state and federal government. And when he tried to get wiretaps and tried to get to the truth of this stuff, he was shut down by the district attorney in New York. He ended up given an ultimatum: either you stop this or we're going to kill you. Since then, he went on his own and started helping people who have lost their children to these pedophile rings. And I've covered a number of those stories. So that's what they're really trying to do. How far will it go? The Pope wants to shut down any kind of scandals. Hillary Clinton says all these fake news people should have their accounts taken away. How far will it go? You won't be able to speak against the Vatican? You won't be able to speak against anybody? I have a feeling that's where they're going with it. And back to what happened. So Tony Alamo, who'd preached the gospel, who I told you this weather's terrible, who preached the gospel and also tried to tell you who the beast was of the Vatican for over 40 years, they had to silence him because he had his messages going out all over the world. Yeah, all over the world his messages were going. Thousands, millions of pieces of literature in every corner of the earth talking about this, and they had to keep him quiet. And he was very successful at it, helping many, many people. So when I started I covered this story for more than a decade, and view this case as a travesty of justice that must be corrected, since it shows freedom of religion and speech do not exist in the U.S. if your views are contrary to those in power. Please go to my long-running radio show archives at Arctic Beacon. You can go to First Amendment Radio, and thank them for being able to being able to get this out somewhere. Or you can go to alamoministries.com and get more regarding Tony and this story. And also there's links regarding the undercover agents' sworn testimony that they were hired to frame Tony. I've interviewed a number of these people, and none of this was allowed in the trial. So what I ask you is to go to freeTonyAlamo.com. Then at the top you'll see Petition to Free Tony. Click on that. It'll take you to the petition site. You can sign it and leave a comment. You can put your name in the public view if you want, or you can just sign it and then not put it in the public view. But here's the point. I want to take all these petitions and go to the pardon attorney for Donald Trump. There's no chance with Obama, because at least Trump is saying he understands Christian persecution. And let's see if he can live up to this and look at this case. And for once, pardon an innocent person, not a criminal. So what we're going to do is do a complete writ, do it very, very methodically, lay out a perfect case, and attach all these petitions. And many people write things and left some great comments on the petition site. And we're going to leave that up and give Trump a little bit of time to get his feet wet in office, let him settle down for a month or so. Then we're going to present it and push it, maybe even have to travel to Washington and see if I could get some interviews with people there and see what I can do to at least drum up some interest. Because the mainstream media has done a number on Tony, and you're going to go throughout the mainstream media. They had this thing orchestrated, so when when his ministry was raided in Fauquier, Arkansas, basically the media was already notified, and it was on all the nightly news channels, and everybody thinks that this was a cult and he was a child abuser, when none of this was true. And you can go back to all my shows and find out. It's an incredible story showing you that Christian persecution exists here in America. Oh, they don't cut your head off yet. They just silence you. And basically, other people that I've met throughout the years that have had small ministries have been targeted just the same. So this is an orchestrated effort to get rid of the Bible, get rid of Christianity, and allow the Vatican to create its one world order, its one world government. That's where it's all leading to. So, looking at this petition right now, I see Cynthia D. just signed it from Turkmenistan, and she says this. What an indictment she makes about America. She says, what is the crime that Pastor Tony Alamo did if he is just preaching the Word of God? I thought America was built on free speech. Well, Cynthia, let me tell you, as an American citizen, it's built on free speech, but you can't talk as long as you follow what the Pope says. As long as you're a Vaticanite, you're fine. Talk against them, and there is no free speech here. Like I said, there is no freedom of religion here. There's an outward sign that everybody can come here and practice their, supposed religion. You can't do it unless you follow the Pope. That's what this is all about. And if you live here, you'll understand what I mean. So go to that petition. Please help us out and sign it. And I'll keep you abreast of what's going on when we start getting this out to the powers that be. Okay, before I play an old interview I did with Tony so you can listen to his voice, I'll just put it in a nutshell. Tony was framed by the FBI. They sent young women and two other young women who also lied in court to be deprogrammed. The FBI paid over $15,000 for them to be deprogrammed. Plus, Tony Alamo would not be in this ministry for the money. And it's go to lamoministries.com and see. The jury noted, you got to look at this, the jury stated that they didn't find any evidence of sex on the trips, which is what Tony Alamo was charged with, taking underage girls across state lines. Now, it's interesting, because really nothing ever happened. And the jury even came back, folks, and asked when they were out deliberating, they came back and they said, if he didn't commit any crimes, can we still convict him? So basically, they had to use the Mann Act, which you have to read the federal law, and it's a way of convicting somebody for some crime without having, all you had to do is show that he crossed state lines, and he used to travel with his ministry across state lines from church to church, and there was never any foul play going on, and there was no evidence of that. These girls were coerced. They were three or four backsliders, some of whom who've recanted afterwards that they wish they didn't do this, but they were taken to a place called Wellspring where they were given gifts, deprogrammed in a sense. They spent $15,000 to $20,000 on this, or even more, and basically got these girls to say certain things that were untrue. People in the ministry knew it. They were even being coached during the trial. So this is really a travesty of justice, and I just wanted to mention that again. And I've said it more eloquently and in a more concise way on many of my other shows, but I wanted to present this before I played a little interview I did with Tony years ago. Okay, so here's that interview I did with Tony Alamo.
This way. I'm going to read something by Father Alberto Rivera, and Tony Alamo knows him well because he had talked to him prior to Father Alberto Rivera, a former Jesuit priest, being poisoned to death by the Jesuits. Now, about a week ago, I had on his wife, Nuri Rivera, and she's going to be back next week, and she's got a new video out, new information, and she told you categorically her husband was killed by them. She also said that she was bribed with $1 million that she refused if she signed a document saying that Father Alberto Rivera was insane and delusional. They then came to her after she refused that and said they'll take care of her and her young son, Alberto Jr., for the rest of their life. This is the Vatican speaking. If she tells them where his bones are buried. Now, what do you think they wanted his bones for? Well, they take him back to the Vatican and they do their satanic worshiping against some of their detractors. I think they feel powerful when they do that. But anyway, when Dr. Rivera says that he wrote an introduction to Paris's book, and I want to read part of it because it's going to tell you what Pastor Alamo's been fighting for years. And what he's going to try to tell you is how Protestantism, how many evangelicals, how the Catholic Church have manipulated the Bible, how they've manipulated our government. And here's what Father Alberto Rivera said before he was poisoned to death by the Jesuits. He said this: the most dangerous of men are those who appear very religious, especially when they are organized in a position of authority. They have the deep respect of the people who are ignorant of their ungodly push for power behind the scenes. These religious men, and he's referring to the Jesuits, who pretend to love God, will resort to murder, incite revolution and wars if necessary to help their cause. They are crafty, intelligent, smooth religious politicians who live in a shadowy world of secret intrigue and phony holiness. This pattern, seen in The Secret History of the Jesuits, the book I'm recommending for you today by Edmund Paris, spiritually speaking, can be seen in the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees at the time of Jesus Christ. The same evil spirit directed the Roman emperors to issue the 10 murderous decrees to persecute the early Christian church. And it goes on, and he says, by the time of Ignatius Loyola arrived on the scene in the 1500s, the Protestant Reformation had seriously damaged the Roman Catholic system. Ignatius de Loyola came to the conclusion that the only way his church could survive was by enforcing the canons and doctrines on a temporal power of the Pope and the Roman Catholic institution, not by just destroying the physical life of the people alone, as the Dominican priests were doing through the Inquisition, but by infiltration and penetration into every sector of life. Protestantism must be compared and used for the benefit of the popes. That was Ignatius de Loyola's personal proposal, among others, to Pope Paul.
Okay, so I'm going to have to take a break, and we'll come back with the interview I did years ago with Tony Alamo.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, welcome back to the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this December 16th, 2016 day in our calendar. And I'm going over the petition to free Pastor Tony Alamo. He's been imprisoned, like I said, for 175 years for crimes he didn't commit. Children at that ministry have been kidnapped and taken away when there's no child abuse ever found. Over 35 children still have not returned to their parents. And it's an incredible story. Even some of the parents were saying that if they lied about Tony, they could get their children back. Now, that's another reason. I mean, this is a frame job from top to bottom. The FBI agents that were hired to frame Tony weren't allowed to testify. In fact, the jury came back when they were doing their deliberations and said, if he didn't commit any crimes, can we still find him guilty? The judge refused to answer and say, just read my instructions. And they were dealing with the Mann Act, a federal outdated crime. They didn't have any evidence that he committed any child abuse, so they had to use the Mann Act to frame him. And I've got shows on that, the legal technicalities. Go to my shows on the Mann Act and Tony Alamo, and you'll see what I mean. I've done many, many hours with this man before they put him in prison regarding the Vatican, a subject that I've been covering for years, ever since I learned the truth about them when I was a journalist in Rome. I used to work for the mainstream. And then the alternative, and both of them are corrupted, basically. When you get to the bigger guys in the alternative media, it's the same thing. And so that's why I call my show The Alternative to the Alternative. But, well, somebody else called it that first. But anyway, instead of playing one of the hours I did with Tony, I did many hours, I'm going to play an article, Bert Krantz of the ministry has done the audio on one of Tony's articles that you can find at alamoministries.com called The Pope's Secrets. And I thought it'd be a good idea. I've played it once before, but I want to play it again now that more people have got attention to this petition. And this is really one article that Tony succinctly talks about the problem with the Vatican. Here we go with Bert Krantz doing the audio, and I might say he did a very good job. Okay, here we go.
Are the IRS, FBI, U.S. Department of Labor, the Mafia, and labor unions part of the Vatican? Is the Pope the super boss of all government agencies, as well as the Vatican? The Pope's Secrets by Tony Alamo. This literature was written in 1983. The Vatican is posing as Snow White, but the Bible says that she's a prostitute, the great whore, a cult, Revelation 19:2. She uses government agency branches in every country, including the United States, as her vicious little dwarfs. The more power and control she gets in government, the more she will fade into the background in her Snow White disguise, so that government will be used and blamed for all her evil deeds. Reason: to enforce laws that harass, malign, destroy, and censor everyone and every idea that is not Roman Catholic, so she can sit as the satanic queen, the big whore. Because of her age-old desire to control the world government and church, the serpent-like Vatican has infested the world and U.S. government with so many of her zealous, highly trained, and dedicated Jesuit devotees that she now controls the United Nations, which she created, the White House, Congress, every state, federal, civic, and social government agency, including the U.S. Department of Labor, the IRS, the FBI, the Supreme Court, judicial systems, the armed forces, state, federal, and other police, also the international banking and Federal Reserve systems, called the Illuminati and Agentur, labor unions, the Mafia, and most of the heavyweight news media. This cult, the Vatican, is very close to replacing our U.S. Constitution with her one-world satanic canon laws of death to the heretic, anyone who is not Roman Catholic. General Lafayette, President George Washington's most respected aide and general, prophetically stated, "If the liberties of the American people are ever destroyed, they will fall by the hand of the Roman Catholic cult's clergy." Today we see the climax of detailed plans given in excerpts from a speech given nearly 50 years ago in Australia by Roman Catholic Archbishop Gilroy. The Roman Catholic motto is "Ourselves alone for our fellow Roman Catholics." We must defeat all heretics, non-Roman Catholics, at the ballot box. The Holy Father states that negative tactics are fatal. The demands of the Holy Father, the Pope, are that the public services should be 100% Roman Catholic soon. Care must be taken that no suspicion may be raised when Roman Catholics are secretly given more government jobs than Protestants, Jews, and other heretics. Multi-millions of people have been slaughtered by the Vatican, thus saith the Lord. Revelation 18:24. History bears record to this fact. During the Roman Catholic Inquisition in Europe, 68 million people were tortured, maimed, and murdered by this huge sect. The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre accounted for the butchering of as many as 100,000 Protestants. Abraham Lincoln blamed the papacy for the Civil War in these words: "This war would never have been possible without the sinister and secretive influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to Popery that we now see our land reddened with the blood of her noblest sons." Lincoln added, "I am for liberty of conscience in its noblest, broadest, and highest sense, but I cannot give liberty of conscience to the Pope and to his followers, the Papists, so long as they tell me through their councils, theologians, and canon laws that their conscience orders them to burn my wife, strangle my children, and cut my throat when they find their opportunity." Because of Abraham Lincoln's many exposés of the Vatican, he was put to death, just as he foretold. Yes, assassinated by the Jesuits under Rome's instructions. The Vatican hasn't changed since Mr. Lincoln's time. JFK's fatal mistake. When John F. Kennedy was asked by the Vatican, "Are you going to go along with the Roman canon law or the U.S. Constitution?" Mr. Kennedy answered them by saying, "The U.S. Constitution." This was President Kennedy's fatal mistake. His assassination was ordered by Rome, then planned and carried out by Jesuits, just as President Lincoln's was. Anyone who knew too much about Mr. Kennedy's assassination was taken care of too. When America cried out for an investigation, Chief Justice Earl Warren, a member of the Vatican's secretive Knights of Columbus, was recruited to do the investigation. He did a lot of double-talking and shuffling, as he was supposed to, and then, after a sufficient period of time, closed the investigation. Like the Pope says, negative actions are fatal. Remember that President Kennedy was a great admirer and student of Abraham Lincoln and knew what Mr. Lincoln knew. World War II, with its casualties of over 30 million deaths, 6 million Jews, the Holocaust, was conjured up and sponsored by the Vatican. Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco were all members of this sect, the Roman Catholic cult. To win the world not for Christ, but for the Vatican, the Antichrist. The turmoil in Central and South America, the tyranny under Jesuit-trained Castro in Cuba and throughout the Caribbean, and the terrorism in Lebanon and Ireland today are the Vatican's handiwork. Now can you see why God calls the Roman Catholic cult the mother of every abomination on earth? Revelation 17:5. The Vatican knew that after World War II, many people were wise to the fact that the war was a Vatican Inquisition. So they had to use one of their famous diversionary tactics and open the John Birch Society to get everybody thinking and talking about communism, which the Vatican also sponsors, instead of the true culprit, the Vatican. This was a great success for them. The Vatican also sponsors every major terrorist group in the world. The reason for this is to keep people's thoughts on unexplainable, insane tragedies that their terrorist groups are committing, while the Vatican is busy undermining all governments of the world, so they can have world dominion, papal power. When terrorist news hits, it is so shocking that it minimizes the news of the Vatican taking away the U.S. Constitution, and of people being deprived deprived of their religious freedoms, being jailed, schools and churches being closed. This is the real thing that the Vatican is after, though. World control of our religion and our government. The more insane, bizarre, unreasonable, and unexplainable terrorism is, the better. The Vatican's heavyweight news media also keeps you busy thinking about it all. Now that they are exposed with their modus operandi, they will soon, with their media and the President of the United States, who just joined them, be the driving force of a campaign to stop all this terrorism that they have created themselves, to make everyone believe that they are good and godly, and that they could have never sponsored anything like this. Update, such as Terry Waite negotiating in Lebanon. Jim Jones, a Roman Catholic Jesuit deacon, posing as a Christian, was sacrificed, not with poisoned Kool-Aid, murdered along with his flock by the Vatican to make the world look narrowly and suspiciously upon innocent Christian retreats. These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. Proverbs 6:16-19. All these things that God hates, the devilish Vatican is. Did you ever notice that with the Vatican-controlled U.S. Customs and Immigration, we cannot get out of this country without going through the 3rd degree, searches, radar, etc.? But in the 1960s, when Jesuit Vatican-trained Timothy Leary led our nation's youth into drug addiction, Immigration and Customs seemed unable then, as they do now, to detect tens of thousands of pounds of narcotics and drugs entering into our once fair nation via the mafia, which launders all of its illicit, ill-gotten gain, all its black market money, through the Vatican. Maybe this is why President Abraham Lincoln said, "I see a very dark cloud on America's horizon," and that dark cloud is coming from Rome. Look at what the Bible says about the Antichrist that caused all this corruption and shed all this blood. "And I saw the woman, the Vatican, drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great amazement." Revelation 17:6. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Revelation 18:7. These governments have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. That is one world government, state and federal, civic and social government agencies included, powered by Satan, giving that power unto the Antichrist by carrying out her orders. Revelation 17:13. These are some of the very last signs in the Bible's book of Revelation, before Jesus comes back to earth again, and time shall be no more. God destroyed the world by water, Sodom and Gomorrah by fire and brimstone. On both occasions, God sent messengers preaching the forthcoming doom. Today, God in his infinite mercy warns all Roman Catholics, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." Revelation 18:4. If you are one of God's people, obey the word by coming out of her. Why? Because to not do so is disobedience, and disobedience is the same as witchcraft. Many Vatican, state, and federal government agencies, such as the IRS, OSHA, and the U.S. Department of Labor, along with labor unions, have wonderfully destroyed the economic backbone of our country by harassing and forcing hundreds of businesses and industries into bankruptcy and out of business. This leaves millions of Americans out of work and hungry, while Vatican-run enterprises are not harassed at all, but do flourish, because they run the government agencies. Look at what God says about the Antichrist when he will be thrown into hell. "They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, Is this the man, the Antichrist, that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness, and destroyed the cities thereof?" Isaiah 14:16 and 17. Feds okay Vatican slave labor camps. Just one of the Vatican's many multi-billion-dollar enterprises is their liquor and wine slave labor camps, which have no labor problems whatsoever because they unlawfully use free labor, thousands of Roman Catholic monks. These federal government agencies will not allow anyone else to enjoy the same privileges of volunteering our labor to God, our Father, and our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, because we are all heretics, non-Roman Catholics. Yes, their enterprises do prosper with no harm or harassment, using free labor in their Christian Brothers, LaSalle, and Benedictine liquor and wine distilleries, slave labor camps, and in many others all the way from Napa Valley, California to New York State. The Vatican's IRS and U.S. Department of Labor now cross the constitutional dividing line of separation between church and state, and in every way are attempting to destroy all fundamental Christian churches and schools. One way is by taking away their tax-exempt status. This anti-American, anti-U.S. Constitution organization, the IRS, however, has given tax-exempt status to all communist organizations in America under Internal Revenue Code 501c3. They have never made any attempt to take this status away from them. Note, up until 1987, all communist organizations were tax-exempt. Now, because of my literature, they removed the tax-exempt status for all communist parties. However, the Vatican communists are so entrenched into government under the guise of Republicans and Democrats that they no longer need exemptions, not to mention the government grants that are given to their pseudo-charitable groups and multi-billion-dollar government grants to parochial schools and other elite Catholic communist organizations. Rome's collection agency, the IRS, has also made sure that the Roman Catholic cult and all those affiliated with it, the One World Church, are the only religious organizations in the U.S. that don't have to pay property tax or even tax on their multi-billion-dollar businesses. This is done under Section 892 of the Internal Revenue Code. The Vatican is the only religion that receives multi-millions of dollars of federal aid each year for their parochial schools. This comes out of your tax dollars. Like Archbishop Gilroy says, ourselves alone for fellow Roman Catholics, and we must defeat all heretics. The Vatican has used the Communist Party to help destroy the Russian Orthodox churches, and she used the Nazi Party in her attempt to do away with the Jews and their synagogues, because the Vatican says that all others than themselves are heretics, non-Roman Catholics. IRS, Roman Cults Collection Agency. The Roman Catholic Jesuits started the international banking system called the Illuminati and the Agentur, and blamed the Jews for this. Rome's motto is, "He that holds the money bags runs the nations." The Vatican started all the wars, inquisitions, to rid the world of heretics, non-Roman Catholics, and then made loans from her banks to nations so they would have enough money to fight them. We foolishly permitted this cult's collection agency into our country, the IRS, which answers only to Rome. According to God's law in the Bible, every 50 years there should be a clearing of debts that can't be paid, a relief. This is called the Year of Jubilee, Leviticus 25:10. Let's bump cultish Roman canon law of death and bondage and get back to God's law and his Son, Christ Jesus.
Okay, I'm all out of time on this Friday. That was Tony's article, The Pope's Secrets. You can get it in its entirety at alamoministries.com, or go to the video that Bert did called The Pope's Secrets. You can get that online. And have a good weekend. I'll be back Monday on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.